Hello, fifth grade. Here's what we're going to do for today. A lot of y'all might recognize this map, but obviously we've had several people be out. We've had several people go onto online learning over the last couple days. So here's the deal. The map that is on the board right now, if you already have it in your notebook, there isn't a whole lot to add to this, but I'll probably jump back here at the very end and talk about these definitions really quick, which again, some of you guys have part of some of them. But this is really for all the people who are out completely because they have no idea how we built this map. So again, if you built this map in class, we can double check to make sure you have all the parts in your notebook if you have your notebook with you. But if you started as an at-home learner or you recently were added as an at-home learner, we can go from scratch on this. Okay, so what we'll do here is I'll just show you all the end game. Okay, but realistically, I'll walk you through the parts because what we're doing in the notebook or on a piece of filler paper, wherever you have about a full sheet or a half sheet of paper, we're going to build a map of the world, but we're going to make it easy and it's just going to be like a reference map because obviously, as you can tell, we're not doing all the continent borders. We're not making them, very accurate as far as shape. That we're using squares and lines and an oval. So this is again just kind of a reference map, and you notice there's a lot of different things on it. There's directions, there are oceans, there are lines of longitude and latitude, and obviously there are continents in these boxes. Okay, so again, if you already did this the other day, what you can do with this screencast is you can just fast forward to the end when I talk real quick about the definitions. And then that's all you have to add. For everybody that is doing this for the first time, we'll just walk through all the parts. Okay, so kind of working backwards here, on your piece of notebook paper or filler paper, you want to make either a really big circle or like I have a really big oval here to represent your Earth or your globe or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so just the outer oval here or a big giant circle that you want to add first. Okay, the next two things we want to add are the red lines. So what we do next is across the middle of your circle or oval, preferably using red if you have it, we want to make the line go across the middle and we want to label it very small over here, equator. Okay, so Equator. And then we want to do the opposite with this line of longitude, which is the prime meridian. So this one goes from the top to the bottom, right down the middle. Now, I don't have it on here, but I did mention it to the students in class that we also put a 0 out here, which you can add, and a 0 somewhere up here to remind us that when we do longitude and latitude, both of these lines are actually 0. So you have a 0 latitude and a 0 longitude. Okay. The next steps we're going to add are the continents themselves. So what we did is we made boxes, some of them of various sizes and shape, but we put them generally in the area where they would be located. So you're going to want to add a box right here and put NA for North America. Then we added a pretty equal size box down here for South America. Now we jump over and we do a few of these out of order, but we went down to the bottom and we made a long skinny rectangle and we wrote out the whole word Antarctica. So this will remind you that Antarctica is just at the bottom, but it spans kind of the entire length of the bottom here of your globe. And then we'll jump up here to the corner that has all of these together. So we put a smaller box with an E for Europe. We put a bigger box, a bigger rectangle next to it for Asia, which would include countries like Russia, China, India, all within the same box. And then around the middle, kind of off to the side, we added a bigger size box for the continent of Africa. So this is a good grouping up here, especially where they're located, because Europe, Asia, and Africa do technically connect, albeit in some places kind of small pieces connect them. But this whole chunk right here is kind of hard to tell the difference. So that's why it's good that we have a reference. So E for Europe, and then Asia over in this corner, and then Africa kind of middle bottom of this section. All right, and last but not least, kind of floating by itself, we have an equal sized box to these other first two, which would be Australia, because Australia is its own country, its own continent, and it's its own island. So it's kind of floating out here by itself. Okay, so far we've got the outline of our oval or our circle. We have the equator, we have the prime meridian, and we have all of our continents just easily labeled using boxes as opposed to trying to draw on the actual landmass. So the next thing we're going to add are oceans. What we did is we just put a line generally in the area where that ocean would be located. But of course, we're not filling this whole area up. We're not coloring it all in blue. We're just generally labeling so we have a reference point. So you want to draw a line, preferably blue if you have it, between North America, Europe, Africa, and South America right here. So you just draw a line kind of in that gap. And then I wrote the word Atlantic kind of sideways just to identify what it is. So obviously the Atlantic Ocean is kind of this whole area if you squiggle back and forth, right? But for our purposes, we just made a line to kind of denote where it would be. Okay. And the same thing is true for some of these other ones. So Indian Ocean, I put in this slip here between Asia, Africa, and Australia, kind of at an angle. So the Indian Ocean is here. The Arctic Circle is up here, so this is known as the Arctic Ocean. And the Pacific is actually on both sides here. You want to add that on both sides because if you think of this as a globe or you think of it as a basketball or some large round object, you have all this going on the front, but you have to imagine that we're also going to have the back side of the globe or the back side of a basketball. So if you're looking at the Pacific Ocean over here, it's almost like you're spinning around and going and seeing the other side of the Pacific peek out on the other side of the globe or the other side of the earth. So that's why Pacific is on both sides, because imagine if you're just kind of traveling around the whole backside of a basketball or of a globe. Okay, so we've got our outline, we've got our red lines, our blue lines, and our black boxes. The last thing we're going to add for this part are all the directional letters. And I use different colors, and if you just want to use pencil, that's fine, but it is nice to use different colors. But I put an N here out on the outside, and I put an N here, which I'll tell you all why here in a second. But you want to go ahead and add all the rest of this. So an S over here for south, an S over here for south, a west, and an east, and an east. Okay, now, why do we put these all in this area? Well, this is to remind you all that when we do hemispheres and also when we talk about latitude and longitude, the north is just not the top of the globe here, right? So I wouldn't want to put an N just at the top because that's a little confusing. You want to have an N on both sides because that reminds you that north is this entire top half. So anything on the top of the equator is considered north hemisphere. Same thing with the S's. So you have an S here and an S here because all of this land, all of this land below the equator is considered south. So South America is clearly south. Australia is clearly south because they're on the bottom half of the earth. The same thing true for east and west. So anything on this right-hand side would now be considered eastern hemisphere. And anything over here would be considered western hemisphere. Okay, so as far as the map goes, that's pretty much it on the map. Now, the other part that not everybody got all the way finished with are these definitions. Okay, I know some of y'all from the other day that have been doing digital learning the whole time, you might already have this. Some of the people that were in class, but it depends on the homeroom that you have, we got through some of these, but maybe not all. And there are obviously some people that have none of them. Okay, so let's just imagine that everybody needs this information. So what you need here is you need to write somewhere, maybe on that same page or just the next page, the term continent, ocean, hemisphere, and then equator and prime meridian can go together. What we want to do as far as a definition, though, is we wouldn't just come up with something in our own words, very basic definition, not necessarily from a textbook or dictionary, because it's easier to remember it that way. Okay, So for continents, for the word continents, in class the other day, the ones that got this far, we literally just said that they are the largest land masses on Earth, or large land masses. Okay, because really, if you notice here, they're the biggest pieces. They're kind of chunked together in some cases, but they're the largest land masses found on Earth. So that's why these are not like countries or states, except for Australia, which is a country. Obviously, within these continents, there are other countries and other states. So continents are just the largest masses. For oceans, we did something similar where we just said the largest bodies of water. So Earth's largest bodies of water, or the largest bodies of water found on Earth, something to that effect. But oceans are obviously bigger than a river or a lake or a pond or a gulf. So oceans are just the largest bodies of water. All right. Hemispheres, we didn't get too deep with either of the homerooms, but to make it short and sweet for now, because we're going to talk about hemispheres again, um, a hemisphere is any half of the Earth. And I know it's tricky by looking at these lines together, but there's actually four halves. Not like one, two, three, and four, but this whole top half is the northern hemisphere, as you can see labeled here and here. And then you have the southern hemisphere, and then it's almost like you imagine those don't exist and you look at these two side by side. So western hemisphere and eastern hemisphere. So technically speaking, there are four hemispheres, there are four halves, which I know mathematically doesn't make sense, but when you look at it, it's basically you're comparing north to south or west to east. So for the definition again, you can just put half of the earth. And for the last part here, equator and prime meridian, we obviously know that they are lines that split in half part of the globe. So that is something you could put for both. They are both lines that split the Earth in half, but you can label them a couple different ways. So equator, first of all, is a line of latitude. So you could say that the equator is, 0 degrees latitude. And you could do the same thing for prime meridian, where you say the prime meridian is 0 degrees, or it's 0 degrees longitude. You could go even further, and for equator, you could say the equator splits the north from the south, and you could say for prime meridian that it separates the west from the east. Okay, so overall, this is pretty much it. Okay, like I said, we had some people that did this map the other day in different parts, and we had some people the other day that had already done some of the definitions. But at this point now, everybody should be caught up to relatively the same place. So whether you started as an online learner, or you currently were added to the online learners, or you're obviously still going to be in session, but you're just off, or you're online today because we've been off, either way, we'd all should be in the same place. Okay. So again, if you needed all of this, or if you needed some of it, either way, we should all be to the same place. So hopefully you guys are all staying safe, and hopefully I see a lot of you all back in school, and we'll get back to work. All right. See you all later.